The following program is an all-language show which includes open discussions on topics related to the LGBTQ+ community and beyond, including, but not limited to mature subject matter such as sex and sexuality, personal experiences, and more. We aim to create a respectful and inclusive space for all. Listener discretion is advised. The views and opinions expressed are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the producers and this outlet. Stay tuned for thought-provoking conversations and so much more.
Hi everybody, this is Gino Vanelli. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Today on Rainbow Country, Egghead and Twinkie. That today. So, stay tuned for Gay Talk Radio right here on Rainbow Country.
Hi, this is Carol Pope.
Hi, I'm Garrett Conley, author of Boy Erased, a memoir.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Segato.
Hi, I'm Gord Depp with the Spoons. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Well, hello and welcome to a brand new journey through Rainbow Country. As I like to call it, a little gay radio show working to give voice to the LGBT community and beyond. And as always, I'm your tour guide through Rainbow Country. I'm producer and host, Mark Tara. By the way, Rainbow Country originates from CIUT-FM in Toronto and now proudly in syndication across Canada. Well, thanks to you tuning in, streaming, downloading, but ultimately listening. Together, we continue to build Rainbow Country into a nationally syndicated gay radio show, as well as being a #1 Canadian LGBT podcast. So today, Egghead and Twinkie, a new queer dramedy from award-winning filmmaker Sarah Combe Holland. So Sarah joins me to talk about the making of Egghead and Twinkie and the story behind that particular title. We'll find out about that particular title and so much more. Plus, in hour 2, music from LGBT artists, independent artists, voices how we've come to know and love in classic disco, classic 80s, classic house, and on this episode I'm featuring some classic disco, some lesbian rock, and more. All that lies ahead on this journey through Rainbow Country and our first stop, the Rainbow Country Bookstore. Today, all the way to Wrightsville. Award-winning filmmaker and author Richard LeMay reads from his debut queer novel, All the Way to Wrightsville, a novel that tells the touching story of male twins. One gay, Pete, one straight, Jackson, and Pete's journey to find himself and love.
The evening went on in a blur of strange new people and limitless alcohol, and by the end of the night, everyone had retired to bed to get some rest for the next day. Back in the hotel room, Pete hastily got changed and jumped under the covers. There was a weird, almost undetectable vibe between him and Doug. He couldn't quite articulate what it was exactly, but it put him on high alert. Doug walked across the room to the foot of the bed, where he stood looking down at Pete. Slowly, he removed one article of clothing after another until he was standing completely naked. Again. "I think it's wild that you have a twin," he said, still looking down at Pete. Pete turned over onto his side and burrowed under the covers. "It's not so wild when you are a twin," he mumbled, thinking that would suffice. "Are you guys identical in every way?" Doug asked. I guess so." After several seconds of Doug staring down at Pete, Doug put out the lights and got into the other bed. Silence. Pete turned onto his back, staring at the ceiling in the dark. There was definitely a palpable energy that Pete was desperately wishing would go away. A minute went by. "Hey," Doug said. Pete almost jumped. He turned to look at him, his stomach tying into tightly wound knots. "You want one more drink?" Doug asked. Okay," Pete said quietly. The next thing he knew, Doug was sitting on the edge of the bed with 2 bottles of beer, still naked. Pete sat up thinking, what the fuck is happening? He resisted the urge to push Doug off the bed. Pete tried to keep his distance as much as he could, though they were separated only by a sheet. Pete could feel the heat from Doug's thigh. They drank in the dark, and Pete felt like he could sense Doug staring at him. His heart began beating faster. He tried to relax, but every alarm in his nervous system was clanging loudly. And that's when Doug leaned in and kissed him. Pete never even closed his eyes or kissed back. In fact, Pete didn't move an inch, as if he was frozen solid. Doug pulled back with a look that said, maybe I just crossed a line. Okay, that just happened, Pete thought. My naked boss just kissed me. Pete lay in the dark, wishing he had never come home at all. A few hours later, he got out of bed and headed downstairs. The house was dark, and every step he made was met with a creak from the floorboards. In the living room, Pete plugged in the Christmas tree and sat on the sofa in the soft glow of the lights. As children, the Moretti brothers would hide and try to ambush Santa. It became a thing with them as well as their father, who would have to sneak around the house and ferret them out of their hiding spots before laying the gifts under the tree. Each year they were told that Santa wouldn't bring them any presents because of their behavior, but he always did. Mr. and Mrs. Moretti's threats became hollow, and with each holiday the goal was to catch Santa in the act. Pete sat staring at the blinking lights on the tree, thinking he had never felt more out of place. The thing that struck him as ironic was that he didn't have another life filled with friends and lovers. He had nothing substantial, only a secret affair with a married man, and yet nothing was the same as before he left. His mother's words echoed in his head. Clearly something is wrong. Part of him felt exposed. Part of him felt angry that his family could probe into his life. Was that love, or was it prying? Pete couldn't tell the difference. He just knew he didn't like it. Waiting for Santa? Pete turned to see Jackson standing in the doorway, wearing his Show Me Your Tits t-shirt. He got it in New Orleans the year before. He looked tired, but smiled at Pete. What are you doing up? Pete asked. Couldn't sleep, Jackson said, as he sat next to his brother on the sofa. They stared at the tree, the twinkling lights sending shadows intermittently throughout the room. Jackson took a glass of water from Pete's hand and downed it, placing the empty glass on the end table. That's okay, I was finished anyway, Pete said. Jackson shrugged. I figured. He turned to Pete. I miss you. I don't blame you, Pete said and smiled. Jackson smiled back. They both turned and continued to stare at the tree in a comfortable silence. Pete suddenly wanted to tell Jackson everything. He swallowed, thinking he needed to tell someone. Suddenly, Jackson turned to him as if he was about to say something. Hey, Jackson said with trepidation in his voice. Yeah? Jackson searched his brother's eyes in the light of the Christmas tree. He shook his head and looked away. I'm glad you're home. Pete knew that was not what Jackson wanted to say. He didn't press. They both turned back to look at the tree, Pete wishing he was still that boy waiting for Santa. So what are you into? Clay asked. Pete thought for a moment and shrugged. I don't know. You don't know? Clay asked with a sarcastic grin on his face. Pete felt a hot flush of embarrassment. What are you into? He asked with a smile. Clay smiled back and leaned in. He spoke almost in a whisper into Pete's ear. I'm into water sports. Pete looked at Clay, thinking that at least they had that in common. Pete loved to swim. He smiled. Me too. Clay pulled back with a look of slight surprise. Really? Yeah, Pete responded. My grandparents lived on a lake. You couldn't get me out of the water when I was a kid. Clay threw his head back and laughed out loud. That's funny. Is it? Pete thought. He wasn't aware he made a joke. Again, Clay looked into Pete's eyes. Well, lucky we found each other. Let's get out of here. I'm going to do this, Pete thought. He nodded his head. Okay. He stood up feeling very confident in his choice when Clay leaned in and whispered in Pete's ear, I can't wait for you to piss all over me. Pete looked at him trying to gauge his seriousness. He looked serious. Oh, shit. Water sports. I'm an idiot. It all became clear in an instant. That's wow, he said, unable to think of anything intelligent to say. Wow is right. Clay stared into Pete's eyes. Seriously, let's get out of here. He pulled Pete by his arm. Pete pulled back. I thought you meant swimming. Again, Clay laughed out loud. You're killing me. Too funny. Pete thought that nothing in this moment was even remotely funny. He looked at Clay and shook his head. "I should stay here with my brother." "No, you shouldn't," Jackson chimed in. Pete turned to Jackson as if he would hit him. He glared at his brother, thinking that no other opinions were needed on this particular subject. He felt the attention of their little group focused on him as panic began to set in. This new world was filled with the unknown. How do you not offend someone when you just don't want to pee on them? Jackson raised a drink to Pete. "Go get him, Tiger." Tiger was something their dad would call them when they were kids. In this moment, that nickname was the last thing Pete wanted to hear. He kept thinking that his dad would be horrified to know his pet name was being used to instigate a night of water sports. Pete stopped. He looked at his brother, feeling the attention from their whole group fixated on him. Jackson smiled. "I won't wait up. Knock him dead, buddy. Love you." Jackson hugged him. Pete whispered in his ear, "I can't do this." Jackson pulled back and grabbed Pete by the shoulders. He looked his brother in the eye with genuine compassion and spoke quietly. "You can do this. Just pull your dick out and wave it around. This guy will know what to do." Pete shook his head, staring into his brother's eyes with a crazed expression. "No, I can't do it," he said in a whisper. Jackson registered something deeper in his brother's expression. He leaned in slightly and whispered, "You mean like erectile dysfunction?" Pete's face went slack. "How the fuck did you—" A hand gently pressed the small of his back. He turned to see Clay at his side. "Let's go," Clay said with a smile.
In the 60s, before the internet, to find each other, queer people needed to actually get together in real space and real time. Since most places didn't tolerate our kind, depending on where you were, your options could be limited. Large cities might have a few specialized commercial spaces, but in the absence of those, it was basically public washrooms, parks, or house parties. They all had their downsides. Commercial spaces required you to spend money, and that's one of the reasons why they were mostly for men. Even in places as big as Toronto, there was seldom more than one lesbian bar at a time. Lesbians earned about 60% of the male wage and probably had more dependents. The economy just wasn't there. The old adage was, gay men go to restaurants, lesbians hold potlucks. Washrooms in parks were also pretty much boys only and could be dangerous, plus parks in the Canadian winter, not so good. You could freeze your willy off. House parties, you needed to know somebody, or know somebody who knew somebody, and so on, and be invited. In terms of commercial life, Montreal had led the pack, developing a Sin City reputation during Prohibition in the US in the 1930s. And where there's sin, there's always a place for us. Toronto the Good and Vancouver took a bit longer, but in 1974, Toronto had enough anonymity and a critical mass to produce a small commercial scene. At first, it was mostly straight bars where we were tolerated in a corner as long as we behaved. Next came a few straight-owned venues that served gay clientele. By the mid-70s, a new class of gay entrepreneurs emerged and started to open up on Church Street where rents were cheaper. But not everybody lived in Toronto or Montreal. In smaller centres, where businesses couldn't meet community needs, the lesbian and gay liberation movement of the 70s came up with a new model. Defy economics and do it for ourselves. We might not have a lot of capital, but we did have free labor. For example, the Lesbian Organization of Toronto established a non-profit community centre in a ramshackle old Victorian house in 1977. It held dances and brunches and drop-ins and provided meeting spaces and a coffee house and hosted a phone line for a whole generation of women. Loot, as it was known, was following a strategy already developed elsewhere. In Saskatoon, the Zodiac Friendship Society opened its community centre in 1973. Edmonton and Calgary soon followed suit. HALO, the Homophile Association of London, Ontario, started in 1974, and the Halifax Gay Alliance for Equality first began running dances in the Turret in 76 and later turned that into a community centre. By the end of the decade, there was a network of lesbian and gay groups providing community spaces in dozens of medium-sized centres across Canada, volunteer-run and community-controlled. This is Tim McCaskill, a gay liberation dinosaur from another planet and author of Queer Progress.
Up next, Egghead and Twinkie.
Hi, I'm Saida Garrett, co-writer of Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mr. Mark Tara.
So, you're a lesbian?
Yes, I'm gay.
You can't possibly know that. You're too young.
I'm 17.
When I was 17, I wanted to be a marine biologist. And now look at me. I'm in real estate.
I'm running away. Right now. Are you in?
What? Where are you going?
Texas. I don't know, I thought it'd be fun. One last hurrah before college.
Twinkie, you sound insane. Is this about last night? Because I really didn't mean to make things awkward.
What about last night?
Never mind.
Here we go. Dallas, Texas, baby.
Let's do this! Someone popular. Who are you talking to?
Just a friend from summer camp.
Liar! That makes 3 lies so far. You were saying.
Was I supposed to know that you were gay the whole time? Because now I just feel like an idiot.
Hey. Hi. Yeah, I don't know. Guess I thought you already knew.
I see the way that boy looks at you. Two are gonna be just fine.
I've known that I was gay since the 5th grade. And it's like everybody thinks that they know me better than I do.
You're my best friend and you're not acting like yourself.
I'm just trying to exist and have a life, and sometimes it feels like you can't be a part of that anymore.
Twinkie! Rise and shine! Today we're gonna turn that frown upside down. Well, lucky for you, we don't have to stop for snacks. What? Why? Stack it!
What? That's awesome.
Gummy bears, gummy worms, Cheetos, popcorn, baby wipes.
Baby wipes?
Well, yeah, for the Cheeto dust.
Duh.
Hey, duh.
Sarah Combe Holland, hello. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I am well. Okay, so we just went back and forth there for a hot minute. How do you say your name correctly, especially your middle name?
It's Combe, so Sarah Combe Holland.
There you go.
Yeah, had to make it hard for people, you know. Yeah.
I have to say thank you so much for being here, to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for this, especially to talk about your film, your feature-length film, your award-winning feature-length film, Egghead and Twinkie. I like to start from the base and build up. So talk to me about essentially the story that you're telling in your award-winning feature-length film, Egghead and Twinkie, and what's the story that you're telling?
Yeah, happy to. Egghead and Twinkie follows these two teenage best friends named Egghead and Twinkie as they travel across the country on this spontaneous road trip to meet Twinkie's online crush in person for the very first time. So it's kind of like a road trip movie, buddy comedy, teen movie all rolled into one.
I often like to talk about things that jump out to me in a film, whether it's a short film or a feature length, as in this case. The very opening really draws you in, a combination of live action, animation, voiceover. The opening of this film, was this always the intent? How did the opening come to be?
That's a really great question. It's actually a discovery that was made in post. So that whole intro, the animated intro where we see, cartoon Egghead and Twinkie, Twinkie kind of introduces herself, that was all created in the post-production process. So in the script, it was supposed to open with the scene that now comes after the intro, with Egghead and Twinkie in the diner. They're mad at each other. We don't know why. So kind of like this cold open thing where we're just thrown right in the middle of it. But it was during test screenings that we realized that opening was really not working because people were like, who are these people? Why are they fighting? And they weren't like intrigued. They just didn't understand what was going on, or like they weren't invested because they didn't know who these people were. So that's where we did some thinking, and one of our editors on the project, Christy, she was like, what if we opened it like Into the Spider-Verse, and we do this animated opening where we kind of catch everybody up to how we got here kind of thing. So yeah, it was a fun discovery that happened during the edit process.
Fascinating. It's amazing how things work out, eh?
Yeah, it is.
The film Egghead and Twinkie, this is based on your award-winning short film, 2019 award-winning short film, Egghead and Twinkie. So here's the question. What originally inspired this story that started off as a short and now a feature length? What's the genesis for Egghead and Twinkie?
Yeah, it's been such a long road because Egghead and Twinkie originally started as a proof of concept short film. It was around 9 minutes long. So I guess if I'm including that, kind of the genesis of the idea of those characters, Egghead and Twinkie, that started when I was 19 and I'm 27 now, so do the math. But I think originally the idea it came to me because I had just come out to my own parents, and the coming out process was very fresh in mind. And I think I really wanted to make a comedy about coming out because I hadn't really seen that done. And I feel like coming out historically has always been portrayed as something really scary and overwhelmingly negative, which I mean, it can be. But I think there is a certain power in being able to laugh at scary things. So I was like, oh, I want to make a comedy. And that's kind of where Egghead and Twinkie started.
So is it fair to say that this film is autobiographical then?
No, not really. It's definitely a fictional story, and Twinkie is honestly very different from me. She is her own person. I think it's more so just like certain feelings that I felt growing up, as a teen, being queer and mixed Asian. There are certain things I can relate to Twinkie about, but the story itself is definitely fictional.
Music. You use music really well. It helps to tell the narrative at times. Talk to me about the process of choosing the music that you do, because it's great. It's a great aspect of the film.
Thank you. Yeah, I was super picky about the music, so I'm so glad to hear that. The music
And
is
it's
one of my
also
favorite
very
things.
retro in a sense, like almost like very 80s.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I listen to a lot of 80s music, so that honestly makes sense. On my Spotify Wrapped, Spotify told me 80s is my biggest genre, so I'll take that as a compliment. But yeah, the music, it was a big process because, we're a super scrappy micro budget film. So like trying to get all the licensing for all those tracks was a huge, huge process. And especially trying to get them to like work with us at our budget level. But a lot of those artists were like super indie, kind of hipster niche artists that I had found over the years. And it was a lot of reaching out to people and chasing them down with the help of our music supervisors, trying to get that licensing in place. But yeah, I made those playlists very early on when I was writing the film. So it was really awesome to get to use a lot of those same tracks that I'd been listening to from the beginning.
So what was the process like for you? As you just said, this is a micro budget film, indie, scrappy. What was the process like for you to make this feature-length film? Did you run up against a lot of, obstacles, like people saying, no, you can't tell this queer story, you can't tell this LGBT story? What was the process like?
Well, the good news about your point about, oh, you can't tell this story is that because we were making it on such a small scale and because we were basically doing it all ourselves, there was no like studio or big exec to tell us no. So, I mean, I got to tell the story I wanted to tell. I think more so it was just the obstacles were related to, do we have enough money for this? How do we get this person to come down, to our budget level? Or how do we get these 22 locations when we only have X money? So it was a lot of like being creative, I guess, to get what we needed. Yeah, it was challenging. I mean, it's a road trip movie, so there's like 22 different locations, and just trying to get all that in order and plan out a shooting schedule that made sense for people was pretty complicated.
Best Comedy Feature, Synquest Film Festival. Best Narrative Feature, Florida Film Festival and Chicago LGBTQ plus International Film Festival. Just 3 awards that your film Egghead and Twinkie have earned. What do you think it is with your film that is resonating with audiences? What is it about your film that you think people are liking?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think there are various aspects of the film that resonate with different people. I think maybe one of the most global themes is friendship, best friendship. I think people resonate with that when they see Egghead and Twinkie together and just their dynamic and how much they love each other and how that kind of grows and changes over the course of the film as Twinkie comes out. I think also a lot of queer people of all ages have come up to me and say that they felt represented or that they wish they had this film when they were growing up, and that's been really rewarding to hear.
Yellow on the outside, white on the inside. Twinkie. I haven't heard the term Twinkie before, but I've heard munja cake. I've heard coconut, all that sort of stuff, especially within the LGBT community. Talk to me about this aspect of the film and how this came to be, how this is included in the film, and the origins of the name Twinkie.
Yeah, it's a complicated and nuanced issue because Twinkie is the main character and she calls herself Twinkie. She's like, that's what I want to be referred to as, when Twinkie is commonly an insult, used against Asian American people that are too Americanized or like, oh, whitewashed or however you want to phrase it. So it was something I was a little nervous to include in the film, honestly, especially since the movie is like so silly, goofy, and lighthearted. And then to kind of touch on racial themes was something I really wanted to do right by. But I felt like it was important. It was something that was a part of the script. It was a part of the short from the very beginning, because I did want to open up this conversation about what it means to be Asian American, what it means to be mixed race. I think a lot of people in the Asian American community struggle with not feeling Asian enough for whatever reason, whether that's because they're mixed or adopted, or maybe they've been in America for many generations and they don't feel as connected to their culture. So I wanted to at least start a conversation about it because I do think it's something that would be impacting Twinkie, especially with her growing up in kind of like white suburbia in Florida.
I too am mixed race and multiracial, and so I could relate to not necessarily the term Twinkie, but the idea of not fitting in, not being this enough or that enough, and when that was happening in the film, I was like, well done to Twinkie to take that term back and owning it, so that people can't weaponize it against her. It's like, you're a Twinkie. It's like, yeah, I am. So what? Let's move on, shall we?
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting thing that happens, right? Like reclamation of words. Like that's something we see in the LGBT community as well, with so many people identifying as queer and using that word now. And for the longest time, like that was a no-no word to use. So it is just kind of an interesting thing, different, I think, minority groups reclaiming certain words that maybe have a bad history.
The title, Egghead and Twinkie, is there an origin story to how this particular title came to be?
Well, it started with naming the characters first, and I guess the name of Twinkie popped into my head because I was thinking about all those things we just discussed, racial identity and such. And then Egghead just came along shortly after. I don't know, it's weird. I didn't really think about it. It all just kind of fell into place, and I was like, oh, that sounds nice. I like those names. It fits the characters. And then the title, it just makes sense to put them both together.
And on that note, we'll return after this Rainbow Country update. But taking us to that break, Canadian trans artist Trans Star and their song, I Bitch.
Here I am again, dissolving at my escritoire. Feels like you're not a fan, and let no one say that you are.
Hi, I'm Garrett Conley, author of Boy Erased, a memoir. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Hello, Rainbow Country. My name is Michael Taylor Jackson, and I am the director of Underground Orange, a queer political activist crime comedy that is having its Canadian world premiere on June 5th at 7 p.m. at the Redwood Theatre in Toronto. So it's going to be an incredible night with actually Bruce LaBruce, the iconic director, and myself in conversation post-screening, followed by some dazzling drag performances. And some of the proceeds will actually go to benefit artists mentoring youth. Please come out and join us and build community. Tickets can be purchased from the redwoodtheater.com website or from our Instagram account at Underground Orange. We really hope to see you there, and thank you so much.
This is gay hip-hop artist, the Mangfather Bob Katz. An artist friend of mine recommended that I check out Mark Tara's Rainbow Country years ago, and I've been enjoying it ever since. Mark's excellent interviews highlight all aspects of the LGBTQ community, and he's not afraid to ask the difficult questions that other hosts avoid. And I love the music that Mark plays on Rainbow Country each week, especially when he plays my music. But seriously, Mark Tara has been such a supporter of my music and has turned me on to so many great LGBTQ artists that I'd never heard of before. I'm so grateful to Mark Tara's Rainbow Country.
So it's June, it's Gay Pride Month, and it's also the launch of Season 10 of Rainbow Country. Can you believe it? We're heading into Season 10 of Rainbow Country. So I wanted to take this time to give some shout outs to some individuals who recently contributed to keep independent radio broadcasting. A special shout out to Carol B., to Lynx Dean, and Rye Levy. A big shout out to those three individuals for helping to keep independent radio alive and broadcasting. So, as you may know, Rainbow Country is an award-winning gay radio show that's heard on broadcast radio, streaming, as well as a podcast. The broadcast outlets that carry Rainbow Country are listener-supported. They rely on donations to help keep the lights on and the airwaves broadcasting. So if you think what I'm doing here on Rainbow Country is worthwhile, I hope you'll consider making a donation to this very outlet you are tuned to. If you happen to be listening to the podcast version of Rainbow Country, I hope you'll consider making a donation to an outlet that does carry this little gay show. How can you do that? Well, simple. Simply head over to marktara.ca, where everything is connected, and hit the donations banner. That's where you'll find all the outlets that broadcast Rainbow Country, a little gay radio show working to give voice to the LGBT community and beyond. Have your voice, have your support, especially for independent queer radio, heard.
Hi, my name is Joanne Vanicola, and I'm an actor and a writer, and I was first on Rainbow Country with Mark Tara on discussing the massacre at Pulse Club in Orlando. I realized how important it was for our community to have a radio station, specifically for our issues, to talk about people in the LGBTQ community and to provide an outlet for our stories, to discuss our politics, culture, and give voice to the issues that matter to us. And of course, our artists and the things that we do globally, and talk about culture. And without people like Mark Tara providing a space for this with a radio show like this, then we wouldn't have that voice. So, support, tune in. Thank you.
I'm Billy Newton Davis, and we're sitting here on Rainbow Country with the fabulous Mark Tara.
Okay, so you and I are both part of the LGBT community. And for myself, I am gay. You are queer.
Yeah.
Asian, American. In your bio, you refer to yourself as queer. And for you, how does queerness refer to yourself? Like, talk to me about that. And we were just mentioning it earlier about taking back terms and reusing them. So for yourself, how does queerness represent you?
Yeah, I think, well, to kind of go back to what we were saying earlier, there's a lot of power in reclaiming these words that have been weaponized against our community. So that's one thing. And then also, I like kind of the broadness of queer. It's sometimes hard to define like shades of gay, I guess. So for me, like, I dated a boy in high school when I was 16, 17, and that was my only relationship I've ever had with a guy. But I do think I maybe had feelings for him back then. I don't date men anymore. I've only dated women, but it still seems I'm like, I don't know, I feel like mostly gay, but it's like, how do you quantify that? So the nice thing about queer is I feel like it's kind of open-ended, and I feel like it's more representative of who I am, especially since I feel like I'm pretty dialed in, like culturally, and I love learning about queer history, and just like the way I live my life, with my girlfriend is very, very gay, very queer. So that's the word I like to use. Yeah.
I love your answer because for me, and I'll be really honest with you, I don't necessarily use the term queer for myself in my personal life. On the show, professionally, of course, I will, and I do. But for me, what I've been finding doing this show now almost 10 years is that, and more so now in the last few years, people are using the term queer if, maybe it's a very, straight-looking man and presenting man, but he paints his nails and, uses the term queer, but has nothing to do with, like, being in same-sex relationships, that sort of thing, right? And so that's what I'm finding, and that's what I'm starting to ask people now, especially when they come to me and they're a part of the show now. And in their history, in their bio, they say, queer this, queer that, queer the other. I'm like, okay, let's find out where you really sit. And
You're like, what do you mean? Yeah.
Exactly, because some people, queerness represents their political views, and that's it. And so while it is an umbrella term, it's almost like it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily refer to same-sex relationships anymore. And gender, of course, gender and gender identity, to me, it's its own thing that can be, of course, queer. But it's like, where do you fit in the term of queer in that umbrella? And I'm so glad that you were open and honest enough to go there with me. So thank you for that.
No, totally. I mean, it's a whole conversation, I feel like, right now in our community.
It is.
So.
It is. Do you think that as a filmmaker, as an award-winning filmmaker, do you think that the content that you're making, you're doing it through a queer lens, through an LGBT lens?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's like if you've gone through all the experiences of coming out and dating people of the same gender and, immersing yourself in the community and our history. Like, I think that that changes how you move through life and how you see the world, and that impacts the art that I make and want to make.
Do you find it challenging to want to tell these stories, these LGBT stories, these queer stories, and finding the talent to tell them? What's that process? What has that process been like for you to find, trans actors, to find lesbian actors, to find gay actors, to find bisexual actors or pansexual actors, whatever the situation calls for? How are you finding the talent pool out there?
Yeah, it is challenging. And especially I think, talking about Egghead and Twinkie, this film, we were shooting in Florida. That's where I lived for 7 years. And before that, I was living in Texas. So, being gay in the South is a very different experience. So I think being in Florida, I wanted to be very respectful of people's privacy and not, ask people straight up if they didn't volunteer the information. So I think it was more so trying to find actors that I felt took the representation very seriously and they understood the impact and the meaning behind it. And I feel really lucky. I had so many deep conversations with my main cast about, what it means to come out or like my story, because that did kind of impact the events of the script. And yeah, I could tell, they all took it seriously and understood, the mission of what we were trying to do. So that was more so how I went about it with this film in particular.
You just mentioned Florida and Texas, and growing up in essentially those two states and being part of the LGBT community and queer. What was it like for you growing up in Texas?
Well, I should clarify, it could be a lot worse. I live in Austin, which everybody
Mhm.
loves. Austin is great. But I did grow up in a very white majority rich community called Westlake, which if you know anybody that lives in Austin, they'll probably hear Westlake and be like, ooh, yeah, Westlake has a reputation. So I think growing up in that sort of community, I think there was maybe one gay couple in my school when I was growing up. So definitely felt a little bit at odds with the world, I think.
What are your thoughts on what's happening now, especially in those two states in particular, politically,
Yeah, it's
and its
upsetting.
impact on the LGBT and queer communities?
Yeah, no, it is. It's upsetting and it's hard, when I've seen both of those places, Texas and Florida, as my home, and I know so many wonderful people that live there, and there's so many great things about those states. I mean, like that's where my ties are, right? Um, but I think it is also hard to accept certain realities, like with Egghead and Twinkie, for example, right? It's such a Florida film. We shot the whole thing in Florida. Most of our cast and crew are from Florida. Um, and in a sense, I guess it feels good to know like this film is needed now, in Florida. But it is upsetting because like we shot this whole Florida movie and then I was talking to a teacher friend and he really wanted to show it at his school. And he was like, I feel like even with all like the don't say gay stuff happening, he was like, I feel like we might be able to get it through because we've shown other movies that are frankly way more um, I guess like violent or sexual or whatever in nature than Egghead and Twinkie. He's like, your movie is very tame and very teeny bopper. I think it should be fine. And he like asked a few different people, went all through the different levels or whatever. And basically it got shut down because the school was like, we just can't take the risk right now of showing anything LGBT themed at all, no matter how, tame it is or whatever. So that wasn't like all that unexpected, but still, it sucks that the movie we made in Florida for Florida teens can't be shown to Florida teens.
In 2025.
Yep. Well, to be fair, I think that conversation was a couple years ago, but it hasn't gotten much better. So,
You earned a Master's of Fine Arts from the University of Central Florida. Why was it important for you to have a background, to have an educational background in the performing arts? Why was that important for you?
Well, I knew that I wanted to study either acting or film, and I ended up choosing film. It was really important to me to go to a school with a BFA program that had a hands-on component, access to film equipment where I could get out there and make films during my time in school. And UCF really fit the bill there. I made several films when I was in college and worked on a lot of different sets. And I think that element of like hands-on experience was really worthwhile for me, just because at my school and like where I grew up, I didn't know a lot of other people that wanted to do film. So just meeting a bunch of other people that were down to work together and collaborate on stuff was really cool.
Mm. Do you find what you learned in school came in handy on Egghead and Twinkie?
Oh, totally. So actually, this is where I should clarify. When I say that Egghead and Twinkie is a super scrappy micro-budget movie, it is. And a big part of that is because it was made by mostly college students. So yeah, we have very strong ties with UCF. So I was getting my master's thesis. I was doing an MFA at UCF while I was shooting Egghead and Twinkie. So Egghead and Twinkie, the feature, is actually my MFA thesis film. So I wrote a 300-page document about the making of Egghead and Twinkie that was part of my dissertation, and then the actual film itself was part of my degree. So it was a massive part in the making of the movie.
Wow. And now Tribeca Films have stepped up and you guys secured a distribution deal. So talk to me about this, and how will the general public be able to see this film?
Yeah, no, we're super, super excited to be with Tribeca Films. And yes, we just released on streaming platforms in North America. So it can be rented or bought on a variety of platforms, including Apple TV, Amazon Prime, Google Play, YouTube, etc. And if people want to learn more about the film and click on the links to stream, all of that is on our website, which is eggheadandtwinkie.com.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel that your little scrappy film made by students will be able to be streamed in people's homes across North America and hopefully the world? How does that make you feel?
No, it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's been such a long journey, and we were doing festivals for such a long time too, that at a certain point I was like, oh my God, are we ever going to release this thing? So I think everyone is really, really excited that it's finally somewhere that people can see it. Especially because this film is pretty unique in that we actually raised a pretty large online following around the making of this film. So there are thousands of people that have been waiting for this film to come out since like 2020 when we first started posting on socials about it. So it's been nice to be able to tell them, oh, at least in North America, you can
Since
watch.
2020 when you started posting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Here's my last question for you. You are an award-winning filmmaker. Your feature-length film is out now to the world to see. What do you hope audiences come away with after they've seen Egghead and Twinkie?
Oh, well, I've been told, and this is one of my favorite compliments about the film, but I've been told this from a few different people now and different reviewers, that watching this movie feels like a warm hug. So I hope that that's what it feels like, for people that go and stream it, because I think as we've kind of talked about in this conversation, there's like a lot of darkness in the world, and I think it's easy to feel kind of hopeless sometimes. So I hope that this movie is just like a nice escape for people, that they can watch it and feel that warm hug feeling, and know that there are people out there like Egghead that will accept them for who they are unconditionally. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, Sarah Combe Holland, well said, well done, well filmed, well made. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being on the show. Very enjoyable. Very enjoyable of this film, Egghead and Twinkie. Well done.
Thank you, Mark. I'm glad you think so.
So, you're a lesbian?
Yes, I'm gay.
You can't possibly know that. You're too young.
I'm 17.
When I was 17, I wanted to be a marine biologist. And now look at me. I'm in real estate.
I'm running away. Right now. Are you in?
What? Where are you going?
Texas. I don't know, I thought it'd be fun. One last hurrah before college.
Twinkie, you sound insane. Is this about last night? Because I really didn't mean to make things awkward.
What about last night?
Never mind.
Here we go, Dallas, Texas, baby.
Let's do this! Someone popular. Who are you talking to?
Just a friend from summer camp.
Liar! That makes 3 lies so far. You were saying.
Was I supposed to know that you were gay the whole time? Because now I just feel like an idiot.
Hey.
Hi.
Yeah, I don't know. Guess I thought you already knew.
I see the way that boy looks at you. Two are gonna be just fine.
I've known that I was gay since the 5th grade. And it's like everybody thinks that they know me better than I do.
You're my best friend and you're not acting like yourself.
I'm just trying to exist and have a life, and sometimes it feels like you can't be a part of that anymore.
Twinkie! Rise and shine! Today we're gonna turn that frown upside down. Well, lucky for you, we don't have to stop for snacks. What? Why? Stack it!
What? That's awesome.
Gummy bears, gummy worms, Cheetos, popcorn, baby wipes.
Baby wipes?
We ate for the Cheeto dust.
Duh.
Hey, duh.
That was my interview with award-winning filmmaker, screenwriter, and actor Sarah Combe Holland. You can watch Egghead and Twinkie on YouTube, Apple TV, and Google Play.
The phone rings. I got a message from the mayor. He's going to call me back the next day. I get the call, and he said, if you'd accept, we'd like to honor you with the key to the city. There was an event later that year in May. Just a key, right? Like, key to what? A decent job, a good singing career. It's really a metaphor, but it's history. So a reporter wants to talk to me and says, well, so it's a key, right? Like, what's the big deal? I said, well, not everybody gets the key. So I looked it up, and I guess it is kind of a big deal.
The date, May 17th, 2018, when trans activist Susan Gapka made history by becoming the first trans woman to be presented with the key to the city of Toronto. By the way, past recipients include Rush and the Raptors.
Hi, I'm singer-songwriter Steve Grand. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
And just like that, this little gay journey through Rainbow Country has come to an end. For the full 2-hour episode, simply head over to marktara.ca, where everything is connected, and hit the archives banner. To keep up to date with the show, check out my socials at Mark Tara and Rainbow Country. The podcast is available on all major platforms. And finally, I want to take this time to thank you for taking your time to be with me. Remember, we are living in days of making dreams come true, so believe in yourself, and the world will believe in you. Now, taking us out, song in my head, Martha and the Muffins.
but now I'm blue. Oh yeah. When you put your arms around me and tell me that you care, I don't wanna be there. I was fine when you met me.